Imagine a journey into the parlor of famed investigative reporter Rob Simone. Imagine the scotch has been flowing, and he is talking with government insider Gordon Novell. Imagine what we might learn if we could sit in. Imagine.
I want to welcome everybody to another edition of Disclosure Dialogue here at the Laughlin Congress in 2009. Now, some of you were here last year where we brought on Dan Bursch, Area 51 scientist, who has never really come forward before. And he stood here and explained his remarkable story that had to do with Area 51, live EBEs, and of course, Majestic 12. Well, we are carrying on this fine tradition with Gordon Novell, someone who has had a front row seat to history and has even participated in more ways than one. He's an infamous person with a very large personality and a very large body of knowledge at his disposal. And we're going to continue this discussion of MJ12, along with his insider knowledge about alien technology and what the government knows and what they have at their possession, who pulls the strings, and what's possible to take this technology forward and perhaps end our dependence on natural gas and oil. Please welcome to the stage Gordon Novell. Gordon, thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
This, I'm sure, for you is a change of pace.
Bit.
Does it feel like you've been dragged out of the shadows?
Yeah, well, I got a cold that kind of dragged me into the shadows.
You are someone who is infamous. Good and bad, you have been part of history.
I don't go with the infamous. I would rather go with the semi-famous.
Well, I think it's fair to begin where history finds you, and that's back in the 70s and 80s. You were involved in the JFK assassination to the degree that one of the prosecutors was trying to fine you to serve a subpoena on you. Can you take us back to that time?
Well, I was his chief of security, so I kind of dumped on him with the NBC with a lie detector test that said he was faking the whole thing. So, I mean, he had reason to be mad.
Who's he?
Jim Garrison.
Jim Garrison.
Yeah, I was
your arch enemy at that time.
Yeah.
And you were not particularly interested, I guess, in talking to him.
No, it wasn't a matter of talking. It was a matter that if I said anything, I was going to either be held in contempt for not saying it, or I was going to be charged with perjury for saying. So you couldn't win. It was catch-22. So I just decided I would avoid him.
So you fled to Ohio.
I didn't flee. I went up to pick up an engagement ring from my former wife.
Okay.
That was what, there was no fleeing at all involved, and it just happened that he decided to send me a subpoena while I was in Ohio.
Still, not a bad strategy. No one would ever think to look in Ohio.
Well, thank God I befriended the governor, and so I didn't have a problem.
Not too bad, not too bad. Well, you, of course, have been sort of linked into this cover-up, too, of the JFK assassination. Is that fair?
Well, I got to kind of disagree with you about this because I don't think you've got the proper perspective.
Set the record straight. Yeah.
At that time, I was working both for Garrison overtly, and covertly I was working for the White House and the Attorney General of the United States. Ramsey Clark was one of my best friends. And we knew that Garrison, we had a pretty good idea that there was assassination conspiracy, but it wasn't the one he was playing with. And the resentfulness was that he was trying to frame the CIA and avoid his avoid his putting any of his spotlight on the mafia because he was too friendly with them. And so we took some umbrage at that, and they asked me if I could unhorse him. And I'd been working at the White House on another project when all that happened, and It just happened. But
when you say you were working with Garrison, in what capacity? Is it
I was his chief of security.
Chief of security.
Yeah.
And so, what other duties did that entail?
Making sure his phones weren't bugged, and keeping basically a good eye on him to make sure that the people who were walking in and out of the office weren't tape recorded, or that somebody wasn't trying to set him up, et cetera, et cetera. But
did you foil any plots?
no, the only plot I foiled was his plots to frame the people he was trying to do, because he was faking letters off the typewriters he seized in evidence, and he would write letters and photocopy signatures using a Xerox machine because people didn't realize how easy it was to do. So it was mostly the plot I was trying to foil was his plot to frame the government.
So how did you come across the information that ran contrary to his theory?
The trash basket.
The what?
The trash basket. When he would get finished with his work, he'd take his work products, whatever it was, and throw it in the trash can. So I got the privilege of shredding the trash, and I didn't shred it.
Oldest trick in the book.
Yeah.
Well, so what did you discover in the round file, as they call it?
Oh, I got a letter where he had typed a letter on Clay Shaw's typewriter that he had seized with a subpoena, and then he typed the letter from Shaw to Oswald, and then put Shaw's...
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah, yeah.
And what was the contents of that, do you recall?
Oh, I don't even remember. It was something about, would you like to have a cup of coffee or something? It wasn't anything other than the fact that it would have implied that they knew each other. And that was what he wanted. That was his conspiracy link. So. But let me repeat again, I was working for the Attorney General.
Right. And
So
you mentioned...
I didn't talk about that for years and years and years until 1993. I didn't say anything about it. There was no need to say anything about it.
What happened in '93 that changed that?
I went to work for Ramsey as chief investigator on the Waco case.
On the Waco case?
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything you saw in the 90s about the Waco case, about the burning and the machine gunning and all those terrible things that the government did to those fine folks, they came out of my shop, including the movie.
You shed some light on that through your investigation and your examination of the FLIR, the night footage.
Yeah, I discovered that, and
when you say that, tell what.
Well, it was a tape that the FBI had taken from an airplane above the compound, and it was of a FLIR, forward-looking infrared, and a lot of people looked at the tape, they didn't look at it carefully, and when I looked at it, I saw these little flashes, and then when I blew them up, I saw that they were machine gun flashes, and we could count the cyclic rate and tie it to the weapon that they were using, and they were just shooting the hell out of the people when they were trying to get out of the fire, women and children. So when I exposed that ended up in a movie called Waco, The Rules of Engagement. It got an Academy Award nomination. So it was a good investigation. It lasted for about 7 years. We went to the Supremes, we couldn't win. And we had them as dead yet. I mean, it was an open and shut case of mass murder. But the court system is, the federal court system, they appoint these judges for life, and they're beholden to the people who appoint them, which is the government of the United States. So you don't get any justice when you go after the FBI for 82 counts of murder one.
Well, going back to this very interesting period in your life, you mentioned you were involved in making sure the office or he wasn't bugged. You have some pretty interesting experience and countermeasures when it comes to listening devices?
Yeah, I originally developed a countermeasure system for the White House that they termed Checkmate, and it would make it impossible for anybody to use a tape recorder or a radio transmitter or laser beams on the window and that kind of thing. It set up a magnetic field screen that you couldn't hear it or see it or any of that, but the microphones all picked it up. So it was quite an invention. It stayed in the White House. It's number one, secrecy, because they wouldn't turn it on unless they were going to talk nuclear war. So yeah, that's how I got there in the first place.
And what year was that? That you?
It was 1966.
66. And did you at that time have any occasion to be called upon to go above and beyond, say, the call of duty as it relates to any of these intelligence agencies to perhaps be an asset or be a provocateur?
I mean, just being in his office was a provocation because, I mean, while I was working for him as his chief of security, because I had a very close friend of mine who was one of his major financial backers, I was working for the White House. And nobody knew it except the Attorney General because I had to clear everything I did with him.
Did he keep you on sort of a loose string? Was it a formal relationship, or were you sort of...
it was money in a
bag man.
Yeah, it was money in a paper bag type of thing, you know. I mean, nobody knew what I was doing. They just figured that I was chief of security, but then he accused me of being the CIA, which I wasn't. I was no more a CIA agent than a man in the moon, but I was working for the president and the Attorney General because we were looking to scuttle his investigation because it was a fraud. You know, it was just out and out fraud. There was nothing there.
What other interesting duties were called upon you during that time? Anything?
I didn't shoot anybody. There was no boom and bang and all of
But
that. Somebody shot at me, but I never found out who. But I didn't. You know, I mean, they don't hit you. It's nothing to worry about.
I have to remember that. Well, you did run afoul of the law a few times. Tell me about this arson conviction.
Well, I ran afoul of the FBI is what I ran afoul of because we came to the conclusion that there was the only people who could murder Kennedy and get away with it was the people who covered it up, and the people who covered it up were the investigators who investigated it and scanned the data. So I became a target of COINTELPRO operations of the Bureau, and I came to New Orleans back around 1976, and about 6-7 months I acquired about $680 million worth of assets because I had been working for Jimmy Ling, and he showed me how to do it.
Jimmy
Ling.
Who was he?
He was the founder of Ling Timco Vought, LTV. It was one of the larger conglomerates in America. So I went to the city and I started buying banks, and I had a line of credit on Wall Street and et cetera. The FBI just went absolutely apoplectic and decided to put together a frame. So they set up a frame through the ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and frame ups, and that's the way it happened. They made some fake tapes. And under Louisiana law at the time, you were not allowed discovery on the tapes. And I had worked 2 years earlier at the White House to put out all the fires in Watergate, because you're missing the bouncing ball a bit in that after New Orleans and the Garrison thing, I went to Nevada and I bought an AM/FM radio and tape recorder, and a plastic tape recorder. It wasn't even a plastic briefcase, which was bogus. And they charged me with interstate transportation, electronic intelligence equipment, and they set the actual precedent because nobody had ever been charged under the Title III Omnibus Safe Streets Act. Thou shalt not possess a device primarily useful for the surreptitious interception of wire communication.
It sounds akin to tearing off the tag from a mattress.
I bought it for $169, and they charged me with interstate transportation of it, and they made it stick because they brought in an army of FBI people who swore up and down this Panasonic Crown AM/FM radio and tape recorder model number. I can almost remember the model number, but
well, what did you do to?
That got me a federal conviction.
A federal offense.
Yeah, but I went and spent it on the ranch, on the president's ranch. I did my probation on the Pedernales Ranch of President Johnson.
Well, what did you do to draw the anger of the FBI in the first place? Was it your assertion and your...
Well, because Garrison was a former FBI agent, and they really wanted to see him make his frame stick on the CIA. The CIA and the FBI were not getting along because the FBI set the CIA up to take the fall for the assassination that I believe they did with the Mafia and the Nazis and Majestic and a whole bunch of other bad guys.
When you say set the stage, what do you mean?
Well, do it. I mean, I don't think it'd be the first time I said that the FBI murdered the president, but I absolutely believe that their Section 5 group got together with some French and they put together a bit of a cabal, and they organized it brilliantly. I mean, it was one of the best assassinations of all time. They got away with it.
Didn't you also serve some jail time for being convicted of arson?
No, that was conspiracy to commit arson. That was based upon these fake tapes that the FBI made up for them, and I ultimately got my hands on the tapes and proved that they were fake and had all the agents fired. And then the president, Reagan, was kind enough to try to dismantle the ATF, so the price of fooling with me was, conspiracy to commit aggravated arson is kind of a joke, because I played with nukes, why would I do something like that? And I had no reason to. There was no motive. It was nothing but fake tapes. Mm-hmm. So...
What was the building in question? What was the event in question?
It was a building that belonged to the Federation of Churches in New Orleans, which they said that we wanted to acquire, but we didn't have a lease or option to purchase it. So it was. You can frame anybody in New Orleans. I mean, New Orleans is a backwater area where they've done some incredible insanities. Mm-hmm. So my mistake was being there, So but I not only got exonerated, I had all the agents fired. Mm. I mean, I wasn't just. We went through 4 trials, and then I got the tapes in the 3rd trial, and they murdered the judge's father, which kind of made him a little bit angry. Mm-hmm. So he put up my bond. The judge, he put the bond up behind the scenes. And it turned out that the district attorney threatened that if he didn't give me 10 years, he was going to indict his father, and his father was a major in the police department. He did indict him. And the problem is that the morning they went for the arraignment, and the judge was sitting next to his father dropped dead of a heart attack, so the judge got a little bit angry. Mm. And so I won, and I won very decisively, because I was able to prove that the government faked the tapes. Mm-hmm. Irrefutably prove it. And so that got them all fired. Mm-hmm.
Speaking of this arson incident, there is another one that plays into history regarding the cover-up of the JFK assassination, 544 Camp Street. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, that's where the Cuban Democratic Revolutionary Front kept its offices, and
where
FBI and Oswald and all of them used to come. It was kind of a gathering. It was an office building that was leased out to the intelligence. I mean, CIA, everybody was there. I mean, it was...
Also, Guy Barrister's office was there.
Yeah.
Wasn't he implicated in giving munitions to these rebels?
Yeah, but I'm the guy who gave him the munitions. So,
I see.
No big deal.
I see. Well, and so how closely were you affiliated with Guy Barrister before he got... he had an unfortunate end, too. He was an FBI agent as well, wasn't he?
Yeah. But he was CIA at the time. I mean, they sometimes change hats, One day you're FBI, next day you're CIA. Mm-hmm.
But, so tell me about your life as a munitions trader.
I wasn't a munitions trader. I was a drag strip owner, and there was an ammunition bunker on my drag strip that I didn't know why it was there, but I get a call from a guy, and he says, look, we're the CIA, and we'd like to get our munitions out of our bunker. And I said, well, it's on my drag strip. And I said, I control all that property. He said, well, why don't you just let us in? And I said, well, come ahead. And they had a key, and they opened it and took all their stuff, and off it went. So supposedly Bannister got it. I get charged later. I tell Garrison about the story, and he decides to charge me with burglary of an ammunition dump.
Well, because they called it a robbery in the end.
Yeah, but the problem was they had this little problem that all the boxes were stamped Inter Armco, and it said that was the CIA's armament company that Sam Cummings used to operate in Alexandria, Virginia. And I had a key, and the CIA said, open it up. And I said, open says me. So, if you want it, it's yours, you take it. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to argue with you. I got a drag strip to run.
Mm-hmm. Did this happen sort of in the middle of the night, or?
Yeah, I would say it was about midnight. Yeah,
Well,
it was a bit
I have
late
to ask,
at night. We weren't interested in having everybody watch us take out all that artillery.
Clearly. But I would imagine at some point, did it not give you pause when the CIA is opening up this munitions bunker in the middle of the night that you somehow might be involved or
What
implicated?
the hell's the difference? It's the CIA. If they say they want to do it, whether they do it at 3 o'clock in the morning or the crack of dawn or high noon, what's the difference? It's the CIA. You know.
Still, it didn't end well, though, did it for you?
It ended well. I didn't ever get convicted because they had to dismiss the charges because when they pushed the window, I said, I'll subpoena everybody. So as soon as I put out the subpoenas, everybody disappeared and the case disappeared. That's why I've been Ramsey Clark's chief gunslinger for many, many years, is because I'm a good lawyer. I don't have to be a lawyer to be a lawyer. I like to eat them for breakfast. If you're a lawyer, then you can't eat them for breakfast.
Well, yeah, to each their own appetite. Tell me about the first time you met Larry Flint, the publisher and owner of Hustler Magazine.
I got an invitation to come to his mansion. He heard that I had a tape of the government threatening to kill DeLorean and his wife and his children at the middle of the Segway point in their little adventure to frame.
John DeLorean, the fellow who...
Yeah, John had been an old friend of mine. John and I had known each other from when I was 15 out on the Salt Flats, and he was working,
He's the one that designed the stainless steel car that was made famous in Back to the Future.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'd known John for a long time, and he said he wanted me to represent him and get him out of it. And I said, well, as long as you don't tell your lawyer I'm involved, we can do this. So.
Did you not supply Larry Flint with other pictures of Larry McDonald, a right-wing Bible-thumping programmer, about an affair he had?
Nope. You got that one wrong.
Okay.
I wish I had. I had gotten paid for it. Larry paid good. Larry paid good.
I could imagine. Did you ever approach Danny Sheehan to try to get your record expunged after that arson conviction?
I may have once talked to him about it, but I didn't have to get my record expunged, pal. I got exonerated. The feds got arrested for framing the case. It's never been done before, but they caught them faking the tapes. They couldn't replicate them under the conditions they swore they made them in 3 trials. So when you can't do that, you're guilty of perjury and fabrication of evidence. So the Inspector General at the Treasury Department decided that all those guys that put the case together had to be fired. And he fired them all, including the one who raped my wife. So, I mean, we weren't playing. I mean, this is, you got to realize that what we're talking about is criminal cases that are used in COINTELPRO, counterintelligence, proactive, to play hardball. You know, I mean, it's the way the game is played. That's a good way to put it. I mean,
in this world that you inhabit, full of landmines and FBI and CIA and midnight rendezvous and bags with money in it, how did you find your way? What was driving you at that stage?
Just, it was a job. I needed to make a living. It was, you know, it was an interesting job, and I got to pal around with presidents and attorney generals and directors of the CIA, et cetera.
And you had certain qualities that came to be quite useful. I mean, did you ever serve as a provocateur or someone who perhaps leaned on people when they needed to be leaned on?
No, I haven't. I'm only 160 pounds. Who am I going to lean on?
Well, I saw pictures of you when you were a little bit younger, back in the 50s. You cut quite a dashing figure. You had a pipe and...
Yeah, but that what are you going to do? I mean, I'm going to beat him in the head with a pipe? I mean, come on. No, I never was. I came up in the streets of New Orleans, and I was a street fighter, and I knew how to fight, and one thing and another. But that didn't make me capable of going around and being an intimidator. I know how to intimidate, believe me. So, but the point that I'm making is that isn't what I do. What I do is intelligence. I don't know. Brain and brawn is for fools. You know, it's just not my style.
Well, at some stage, you switched tracks. You were obviously involved in this quasi-political backseat maneuvering for quite a long time, which I guess you were able to make a living out of. But at some point, you turned your attention to exotic technology. Tell us how that began for you.
Well, it began for me when I built I got into the electronic surveillance business after the World's Fair. I built the Bourbon Street Pavilion. At
Which World's Fair? What year are we talking
64, 65, that one.
Okay.
I also created the 84 World's Fair in New Orleans. So, okay. I mean, I'm an industrialist besides being a spook. Okay.
Interesting. Okay, so 64 World's Fair. Take us there.
I built Bourbon Street, which was about 180,000 square foot under roof, and was trying to emulate my father and my mentor that who gave me a job when I was in college building balloons for around the world in 80 days. I got to gaggle at his wife, Elizabeth. So, I've had sort of a storied career in life, in college, and one thing and another.
So tell us how you came to be involved, perhaps in the UFO field, the back engineering, this exotic research.
We were building race cars when I was a kid, and we decided we wanted to go to the Salt Flats, and that's how I got hooked up with Chet Herbert and John DeLorean and all these famous people in the racing business, because we built a car that held a world land speed record. I designed it for 40 years. We had a AA Unlimited. We took a Ford Thunderbird, turned it into a Bonneville Streamliner, and made it go 240 miles an hour, and the record at that time was 169, so nobody touched it, because we introduced quietly nitrous oxide to racing, and it really gave us a lot of power. Nobody knew about it for 20 years or so. We forgot to tell the inspectors. It worked real good, because it was the secret of how the British won the Battle of Britain, because the Germans had the twin supercharged Me-109s and Stukas, and they could fly at 40,000 feet, and the poor little Spitfires couldn't get above 25,000. They'd dive down on them, shoot them up, and the Brits were losing. And a brilliant engineer by the name of Sir Harry Ricardo found out that if you just turn open a bottle of nitrous oxide into an engine, 40% power increase. We found out about it and put it on the Bonneville Salt Flats and set the record up so high nobody could touch it for 40 years. So I was real proud of that. I mean, we didn't cheat because it was not illegal. We just didn't tell them the fire extinguishers were really nitrous oxide.
Good thing you never had to use them.
It's a great high.
Right, well...
It's a fun high.
Well, I know the Grateful Dead did a few albums on it. Well, okay, so you set the stage for there. You were interested in engines and making things go fast. Okay, and then how did it evolve?
Every so often, in the early 50s, there were a lot of UFOs around. They were around all the time, and I don't know why they wanted to come around. I guess they were doing their introduction act. We're here, folks. So we were into going fast, and the UFO really moved. I mean, it could go 0 to 500 miles an hour in about a second and a half.
So you were watching these things and observing their
We
performance
were
characteristics?
reading about them and watching them, and we'd go out on the Salt Flats, and sometimes we could see them, and they were zipping across out there, and they'd come to the races, is a good way to put it.
Were you ever in the company of someone of notoriety who witnessed these UFOs?
Notoriety? No, I can't think of anybody.
Okay. So you saw this and it turned you on to a larger universe, and then how did it proceed from there?
Well, at that point we started figuring out, well, how can you build one of these things? We didn't care where they were from, or when they were from, or how they were from, or why they were from. And that was all irrelevant. How they got here was the big trick. So Chet Herbert, the racing cam guy who has a car right now he's about to put out a car with his son that goes 600 miles an hour using the wheels to drive it, not a jet car, driven by wheels. He was really into it. So when we would go out to the Salt Flats and we'd start talking about racing, it'd just automatically go into how does a UFO work? Because it was the epitome of go quick. You know, I mean, let's face it, those things are, I mean, they're a really remarkable machine from the standpoint of go quick.
You were trying to set another land speed record, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to build something and take a run through the traps at 5,000 miles an hour. That would be a real, you know.
So your reach
really turn heads.
Your reach exceeded your grasp at that point. When did you start to come across people who were actually tied into the UFO issue?
I studied aeronautical engineering when I was in college at Northrop Aeronautical Institute of Technology, so I was really into to designing things that went fast and really fast. And so I just kept up the investigation. I became a pretty good investigator. Some people say I'm reasonably intelligent, and I just kept digging, and one day I got real lucky, and I ran across a guy who had actually seen the inside of Uncle's bird, and so we were able to get some engineering drawings of it. And
Uncle's bird?
Well, yeah, Uncle started a reverse engineering process on the crashes right after Roswell.
Who's Uncle?
Well, Uncle at that time was called the Committee of the Majority, and it had been formed by President Truman, and they euphemistically call themselves MJ-12 because of they set up a little cabal of 12 holy men, you know, like Jesus and
disciples.
Yeah, and so we kept investigating. I mean, it was one of these things where you say, if I'm going to crack this puzzle, I'm going to have to do it in a thorough sort of way. So one of the ways was I acquired the world's largest library of UFO books, and I deductively reasoned that there were a huge amount of witness reports, and while some people will tell you that illegal evidence is, meaning like a UFO will stop an automobile, and when the UFO moves away, the engine automatically restarts without the starter engaging. Well, what does that tell you? That tells you that time stopped, and that engine was really in suspended animation, and that's what happens to people. Their biological processes stop. From a standpoint of time is a flow of electrical energy. This is caused by an electric field, okay, that's pushing, it's hidden, and it pushes downward on mass, and it's hidden in time. The electrons that are causing this to go downward are repulsive electrons, and it'll do it on anything, but they're hidden. And they're hidden in what the universe is always dual. It's got time and no time, light and dark, on and off, right and wrong, true and false. So there's time and no time exists within a box of time. And Einstein just didn't get it all together, because if Einstein knew what he was talking about with general relativity, everybody would be flying UFOs, and we'd be powering these buildings with a motor generator out of that concept. But he was able to understand that inertia was equivalent to gravity, and he said it. But what he didn't say, because he had dimensionalized it, which he said space, which is length, width, and height, is space, empty, nothing, and that there's time. And he made time into a dimension, which it really ain't. It's an electrical phenomenon that we, as sentient beings, experience. Animals don't experience it like we do, but they do in a sort of way, but they know when it's up and down. The lights are on and the sun's up, etc. So he just forgot that gravity exists and inertia exists in time. So time is also gravity. And if you can kill gravity, you can cause that to stop, you stop the clock.
Stop time as well.
You stop the clock, and you may well annihilate space as we understand it, as we currently understand it, meaning length, width, and height may go away, because what's in that length, width, and height is a hidden electrical field full of little particles who shove things down, but they exist in no time. So if you're going to kill gravity, you got to kill time. Time and gravity are concomitant.
This is
Did I make myself clear?
Well, I was just going to say, This is, we're getting into some of the theory here. I just want to mention, at the end of this, we're going to allow plenty of time for questions. So you all can participate, write some questions down if they're coming to you as we're talking, because we're going to have this microphone open and we'll have plenty of time for you to ask questions on things that we cover. Now, I'm saying questions, not comments. Questions only, please. Well, let's go back to this uncle. You said this whole thing started by this uncle. Who are we talking about?
Well, Uncle was Uncle Sam, but Uncle created Majestic, and then it got out of control because the boys recognized that if you have anti-gravity, then you can theoretically anti-gravity eliminates the laws of general relativity. All right, now.
No, when you say get out of hand, I first want to talk about who we're talking about with the Majestic.
Okay.
Yeah, but you must have met someone that had been inside this craft that gave you this knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, I met a guy who got to see the inside of it, and
right now,
we were able
my
to
question
turn that
is,
into engineering drawings.
Oh, that's great, but who's the guy?
Well, his name
we don't like to say the guy. This is
well, his name is we gave him a code name because I've never insulted him by revealing his name because he wasn't supposed to tell anybody he saw this.
Is he still living?
Oh yeah, he's a very prominent industrial designer. California, very prominent.
Is he still part of? Is he still in?
Yeah, he's part of my team.
Let me get the question out. Let me get the question out because I know you know what I'm going to ask,
yeah.
But they might not know what I'm going to ask. Is he still part of Majestic?
No, he never was part of Majestic.
Oh.
He was an industrial designer who went there because he did some plastic casting for him, and he got to see the inside of the. He got to see the inside of the. He went to a place where the bird was.
I see.
And the bird was floating in the air, and the panel was off, and he could look inside of it, and he saw everything, and he memorized it, and he then translated it over to industrial drawings, which we then reverse engineered. Which
Right.
Is what
So that was your glimpse into this very secretive world. Obviously, he was brought in there to do some very specialized work there. Now, does he know? Can you tell us what base this was at or what time it was happening?
Yeah, it was at Lockheed Skunk Works. It was done by him and Ben. He went out there as a guest of Ben Rich.
Okay. And this is about what, the late 60s or?
1988.
It was 88.
November 12th.
Okay. November 12th. How come you remember that date so well?
Because that's the day he told us the lie about where he was on that date, which I then found out he was somewhere else and that he had gone to this place and then flown over to this other place to put a cover story down about where he really was and wasn't. And
so this gentleman that won't be named, how long have you had a relationship before he went to this base?
I never knew him.
Oh, okay.
It's a friend of mine who was an industrial artist met him, and we had set up a spy network, we being Dr. George Eulig, who was head of Hercules Aerospace and the guy who invented the Trident missile. And we set up a spy network to spy on the government. And we found a hole in their whole security apparatus that the industrial artists didn't have to have clearances to be able to take these beautiful engineering plans and then flesh them out and draw planes before they built. And as a result, all these industrial artists that work for these aerospace companies get to see the black stuff before anybody else does. And we went and we created a little network of them from Seattle to Boeing, from San Diego to Seattle, and our General Dynamics to Boeing is a good way to put it. And one of them called us up and said, "Hey, I got a buddy of mine. Went to an air show and got to see this fabulous da-da-da-da-da-da-da." And the thing was floating in the air, and it got cold around it, and looked like it weighed 20 tons, and boom, boom, boom. So we jumped on a plane and went there, and we got it and started the reverse engineering process. That was 20 years ago. It's a real tough job.
I can imagine. And this craft that this gentleman saw and observed the inside, can you give us an idea what it looked like and where it came from?
It looked like an upside down, it looked like an angel food cake with a dome on the top. You know, it was an upside down cake. It was trapezoidal shaped and had a dome, and the dome was all through the inside, and it was filled full of capacitors and all kinds of other neat little things. And he made some really good engineering pictures of it, and we took those pictures and we started, and then we found a film of it flitting across the sky in '94. Remember, we got our hands on it in '88. Then we ran into 7 or 8 different people who had seen it, and we were able to put a case together, and I wrote a report called the SCS report.
The what now?
The SCS report, Supreme Cosmic Secret, how the U.S. government reverse engineered an extraterrestrial space.
Who was the report intended for?
The United States Central Intelligence Office of DS&T, Director of Science and Technology.
Director of Science and Technology?
Directorate.
Directorate. And was it received in good order?
Yeah. They're my backer.
I see. And this craft, any idea where it came from?
No, they stole it.
Skunk Works?
The Majestic Boys got it
Well, it was at Skunk Works.
It was built from the crash birds where they could touch and feel the stuff, you know.
This was a prototype based on earlier
Yeah,
crash.
but it was a Model T version because the alien stuff was a little bit better.
I understand that, but just so we can get it straight, this was a prototype of earlier crash vehicles that were being kept at other Air Force bases, perhaps?
It was a prototype of a vehicle that was being kept at the time we saw it was being kept at S4 section of Area 51.
Mm-hmm. So you're to understand, not having seen it, you're there yourself.
We're pretty good on getting down to the inside of things.
I know you walked around there and said there's no base at Papoose.
No, I never did say that.
No?
I got pictures and cutaways of the interior of it, so I wouldn't say that.
So you
said that.
Okay, so if that's not true, so tell us about this experience of being there.
I didn't go.
Uh-huh.
I got the security guy had a real good memory of what it was like in there, and we were able to get him to do some sketches. And
a security guy? Is this a Wackenhut security guy?
Yeah, somebody.
I see you don't want to reveal your assets. That's smart.
Yeah, well,
so you actually managed to get someone to risk their life by telling you this information, huh?
I know more than he does, so who's risking whose life?
But he's the one that's breaking his agreement.
Well, but
you're not obligated.
Who is his secrecy agreement with? It's not with the United States government, it's with Majestic 12. Majestic 12 is no longer the United States government. It's the Bilderbergers and the Illuminati and the Council of Foreign Relations and the Club of Rome and the Round Table and all the other gangbangsters who run the world.
Mm-hmm. So what was your motivation to get this person to come over to your side and give you information when...
Yeah, I only wanted the interior of what the vault looked out there, because one of these days I may go in there and play stick 'em up and stand down.
Mm-hmm. Was this a difficult discussion? Did you have to... Was it just sort of a very cordial...
I mean, they cut off his girlfriend's finger and sent it to him in an envelope, so it was no big deal. I mean...
They did?
Yeah, they were really angry at him.
Because of what?
He wanted to quit.
Why was that such a bone of contention?
Because he knew too much, and he wanted to quit, and he didn't ask permission. He just went off and decided to go to Phoenix and one thing and another, and then when they told him to come back, and you know, you got to come back to the farm and the ranch and Watertown and Rainbowville or whatever they call it, you know, I mean, they got a jillion code names for it, so they just got angry at him.
Right, and that soured his relationship and perhaps motivated him to talk to you.
Yeah. He had good reason to talk to us.
Right.
We had other reasons that motivated him.
So this is just an example. I have some other diagrams that you provided that show what you're talking about as far as back engineering these different craft.
Reverse engineering.
Reverse engineering, and well, this is just actually a freedom of information request that I thought I'd bring up here as we were talking about it before. The assassination of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy, November 22nd, 1963, and your mention in this Gordon Novell had informed friends that and inmates, I guess when you were serving time, that he was a CIA operative that would use this role to battle Garrison's subpoena.
Oh, what's the document? I mean,
this document is
I'm ignorant of that document.
held classified until
by who?
Classified
by
date.
who? Who's that?
SAC, New Orleans, director of FBI.
Oh, well, then it's got to be fake.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just automatic. I mean, they look. You don't want to really hear what I think about the FBI. I mean, you know, anybody that murdered 82 women and children at Waco just because some guys dinging their wives or something like that. I mean, it's ridiculous, you know. So they had their little program, but I'm just not a fan of the FBI. I am a fan since 1993. Under Robert Mueller, they have been doing an incredibly good job. Prior to that, they were nothing but gangsters. They make the mafia look like altar boys.
That's not easily done. Well, let's go back to this secret base we're talking about. I have some photographs of the area in question here on our display. This is an area view that's coming up in a minute. And this, do you think that this area, this Area 51, had multiple alien technology, multiple vehicles recovered from crashes?
Yeah, there were supposedly about 12 of them inside the mountain out there. They picked them up over the years. These guys went out and took over the world with this. I mean, this is really a powerful technology, because if you get rid of the cost of oil, people don't realize that we, in our modern civilization, we pay through the nose for the right to live in this modern society where there's no horses and buggies outside, and you know, you don't fuel the buggy by a bucket of oats. You have to buy gasoline and put it in your automobile, and when you do that, you're spending macroeconomically, the cost of energy is 80 cents out of every dollar. 80 cents. And the other 20 cents in your dollar goes for the distribution of goods and services, which also has a big energy element. So the reason that we spend money is because we're forced to by the criminals who control the energy assets. And they make us give away our wealth as individuals, which is free. Energy should be free. We have to pay it out to these gangsters. I call them gangbangsters because I don't know what else to call them. And the banks get the money from these energy transactions. Every time a load of oil comes into a port, there's a bill of lading and a big bunch of dollars play, and they go to a bank, and those banks all collect that money. Well, that money is approximately 44 trillion GDP a year. 80% of that goes into the banks from the transactions in energy. And we don't have to pay for energy. Energy should be free. ET doesn't pay for it because it's free. So ET is very wealthy. Everybody's wealthy.
Right. Well, okay, you said you had some interesting inside intelligence provided from you from a security guy and this fellow who was involved in these this large industry. What other sources of information assisted you in back engineering this kind of technology?
I put together my own little Manhattan Project type of team.
Do tell.
And so I went out and called all my friends over the years that I had met in the chase of UFO, and I said, hey, I got it. I'm writing a book about it. It's called Supreme Cosmic Secret. It's 1,500 pages, and I'm submitting it to CIA, and I would like to get you to peer review it. And they did the peer review, and everybody said, oh, we want to, you know, how do we get a piece of this action? I said, well, just join the team. So we created an organization called the Knights Temporal, sort of like it was our...
Not Templar,
No, temporal, like in time. And we knew the story of the Knights Templar, and they were blackmailing the Pope over, you know, who was Mary Magdalene and what was Jesus doing with her and all of this. And so we decided that we were going to blackmail Majestic, which is what's been going on for a long time. So.
This couldn't have been your only source of information, this one look into this?
Well, I mean, I know everybody. I mean, it's no big deal.
So tell us about the other significant sources.
Well, I know all the rocket scientists. Those were sources. They had pieces of the puzzle. I knew a lot of physics engineers and physicists. And I just went out and assembled me a team. I said, if I got the technology, I knew I had it in '88, then I would have to assemble a team to back engineer from what we knew and do it, and then I would have to create a reason to do that, and so I wrote a book.
This book you wrote, this was after you've assembled the team and gotten the benefit of all their knowledge?
No. I put the book together to get the team together so that the team would believe, because I couldn't afford them.
Right.
You know, these guys all get their high ticket.
So if you wrote this book before you assembled the team, tell me about your sources of information for the book.
I went and I got myself a library. I met an 80-year-old man who was about getting old, and he had been a collector of every book in the world on UFOs, and I used that as my research library. So I had bigger than the Library of Congress.
So you had this UFO library, basically UFO books.
Yeah, that was a good place, and then I got into the physics of it and started researching the electrodynamics of the physics and how it all worked, and started really getting into gravity and what was known at the time, and just constantly collecting here and there in bits and pieces. And then after a while, we got the pretty good picture of it.
Here's a question for you, because a lot of people here have a pretty good collection themselves, seen what's out there, seen what's available through the years, from George Van Tassel to Adamski to everything else. What books in particular were especially of interest or useful for this type of detailed technological pursuit that you were endeavoring?
I would say that there was only maybe one or two in the whole thing.
Okay,
there was Corso's book was helpful because it gave you a sense of reality, okay, that there was a real, no bullshit reality to what he was saying. But the book, I would say, would be Paul R. Hill's Unconventional Flying Objects, and James McDonnell, or whatever his name was, I think is like that. But Hill's book is seminal. It really cuts a UFO apart. Because what is the great mystery is, how did they do it? They ain't blowing anything out the pipes. You know, they're just floating up in the air, and how did they do that?
And a lot of these books, I'm sure,
magic.
A lot of these books also that you're talking about that you obviously had amassed were personal accounts, contactees, abductees, right? Now, I'm sure that is helpful in some sense, but you're saying these two books were really the ones that you could really lean on as far as building a theory for propulsion.
Yeah, I would say that they gave a huge amount of it, but you got to remember, I had the cutaways.
What?
I had the cutaway engineering drawings that were my advantage.
Based on the testimony.
Yeah, and then I also took the book and I put it on 37 CD-ROMs, and I got my son, who's a lawyer in Bangkok, to put it out at all the law firms. And then I wrote Majestic a letter through Wackenhut, and I said, if you fool with me, I'm going to put it on the web. So it became my death insurance, not life insurance.
So you wrote this book really based on a few UFO books and the testimony of
2,500 UFO.
Right, but these two that were key as far as building your theory.
Yeah, well, you asked, I wouldn't say that they were. Every little book has something in it that's got some value, because every time E.T. comes in here, he's coming in here to transmit information into the record. And there's going to be some idiot like me who goes and gets the record and sifts it and looks through it and comes up with the answers because they put them there. That's why they're here, is to transmit information. The only reason they come into our atmosphere, who do you want to see? A bunch of backward barbarians, fornicating. Let's be honest about it. What is it that we've got here that they might want to see? Backward barbarians fornicating. So you can't say that people who run their civilization the way we're currently running it, and we're letting our government get away with it, are really intelligent. Okay, I mean, we have our intelligence, our law enforcement goes out and murders the president, and everybody says, "Oh, well, Lee Harvey Oswald did it," you know, or "Gee, Martin Luther King got killed by James Earl Ray," and Bobby Kennedy got zapped by Sirhan, and all of these were accidents at the time. In that little short period of time, all those accidents happened. As barbarians. We're barbarians.
Well, maybe more on the East Coast than the West Coast, but I generally agree.
Listen, in my opinion, we're going through this terrible financial crisis because we deserve it. Why do we deserve it? We re-elected Bush in the second term after he murdered, and we allowed him to murder 1 million people who did us no harm. That's murder. I mean, the man ought to be tried as a war criminal. And all We're doing that right now. Mr. Clark has got, Ramsey Clark is trying to raise money. We got 1 million signatures to impeach him, and we couldn't get a member of Congress to say yay. But if it would have been for like Bill Clinton did his little silly deed, he gets impeached, and but our beloved president goes off and he trashes $1 trillion or so of our money. Then he trashes our economy, and he murders 1 million people, and we let him go home. And
well, I think Gore Vidal said it best. This is the United States of amnesia.
it's a United States of stupidity. I mean, when I say to you that I believe we're barbarians, it's because we're out there murdering people right now. We're not going to get out of Afghanistan. The Russians couldn't get out of Afghanistan. They had to leave. When they left, the dope dealers come back because they have those great little poppies over there that Majestic likes because they make cash out of it. They can keep their machine going out in the desert.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's an interesting question. Where does the funding come from, MJ-12? Is it part of the black budget?
My information is that the black budget ain't that big, okay? And they have spent. I was told that they had that when we decided to take over and run the Russians out of Afghanistan, it's because Majestic wanted the poppy fields. And that when we got stuck in Vietnam, it's because Majestic wanted the poppy fields. And then when we got stuck down in Colombia, it's because Majestic wanted the cocoa fields. And that most of that money goes through one means or another back into the mountains, and that they've used it to suppress the research of anti-gravity by giving the University of Beijing at the height of the Cold War $5 million for a study on fruit fly mating habits. And the agreement being a quid pro quo was your physics department will not waste its money on gravity. And they suppressed everything like mad from the 50s until just very recently on gravity. And about $100 billion went out through cover companies of foundations and charities in Switzerland and Liechtenstein and Luxembourg. Paid out these monies to all these universities not to do gravity research. So they suppressed gravity research since the mid-50s, and they continue to suppress it. If there's any money given for a gravity research project, it's going to be given to me, because we've got an RFP, request for proposal, in for it right now. And we're doing a movie that says, here, Mr. President, and you got a problem, and here's the problem, and if you don't address the problem, we're going to sell this movie.
Well, this is an interesting juncture that you've told us about, this book that you've come up with through your research.
I've been offered $300,000 for the book, and it ain't for sale.
In your library. I'm wondering, though, because this is an interesting part. There are some books in the UFO library and the UFO field that are quite detailed, but a lot of them, I dare say most of them, are contactee or abductee related. How much of that, of the abduction or contact experience, was helpful or influential in you deriving at your final theory?
The only thing that they ever say that has got hell of a relevance is the issue of time, because time they don't leave evidence. The only thing they leave is impressions in the memories of the people. And they are witnesses, like you would take 12 jurors. Well, they're competent people, and people get up there and they swear a lie, and and they tell their tale, and we believe them. So why wouldn't we believe 70,000 structured intelligence reports put into the UFO literature? Because that's about how many there are, but 70,000. So if I'm not going to believe 70,000 people all telling me the same tale, I got to be dumb. So what I'm telling you is that is what I found was extremely valuable, was the reports of the witnesses. Because if we can't get the science, let's at least get what they saw.
Did you ever aggressively go after people who have a story to tell about their contact experience?
Yeah, I date a couple of them.
That's aggressive.
Yeah,
seriously, we'll go back to this book. You actually were able to collect a team. Tell us about this team you assembled. I mean, I'm sure there'd be names that we'd recognize.
Yeah, I mean, they were this very famous physicist and chemist, and
like who are we talking about?
Hal Puthoff.
Hal Puthoff, right?
One. And David Froning, this guy who invented the anti-missile missile. And
Burt Rutan.
He used to be friendly, and Burt and I had a falling out.
Oh dear. John Alexander?
Yeah, but John is into UFO, but he's not into the physics or the engineering of it.
Are some of these people also on the Advanced Theoretical Physics Working Group?
Yeah.
You're part of that as well, yeah?
Yeah. They say I'm part of Aquarius, and I mean, the undercover thing, you know.
What do you mean? I don't.
Is it Aquarius? Is it, the Avery? Yeah, I supposedly founded the Avery, which is a lie.
So tell me about this Advanced Theoretical Physics Working Group. What do they do primarily?
They all hypothesize.
Are they a think tank?
Yeah, but they don't go about it in I like them, most of them. They're very interesting people, but they're theoretical. I'm not into theoretical. I'm into cut and bend. You know, if you can't cut and bend a symbol and test, you're really just
It sounds like, well, they've been around for
exercise.
a good number of years. Have they produced any interesting papers? Or
They produce papers all the time. I mean, I got 100 pounds of them or 200 pounds of them, but they don't produce hardware. I mean,
now, when I ask you about papers, I guess let me refine that question a little bit. Do they have any papers that relate to the UFO propulsion technology?
Yeah, but nothing I've ever seen that gets to the nitty-gritty. The only thing I've ever seen was the circuit itself. It's a circuit. It's a big, very high voltage electrical circuit.
That they have put forward? Or
well, Uncle copied it off the crashes in Corona and Roswell and Spitzenberg.
No, when you say circuit, was that something that the physics group put forward? Was that something the physics group put forward, the circuit?
No, the circuit was put forward by the guy who got in the hangar and saw it that I told you about.
Okay.
That's the circuit.
My question was, the physics group, what have they put forward related to?
Nothing. I mean, what you're talking about doesn't seem to have any relevancy to me.
Well, aren't you part of the group?
It's no big deal.
The group's not a big deal. Oh, your involvement in it isn't.
Yeah, I mean, my involvement is that I got my own theory. Everybody's got their own theory. It's one of the problems in the physics business is there's an NIH factor, not invented here, and a lot of them have it.
So you're not really an active member or participant in that group anymore?
No, not really.
Okay. So when you were, what was your role? Were you in the scientific side, the theoretical side?
I don't even know. I mean, if you said who these people are, I don't know. I mean, you're talking about people that I know of, and I know the situation, but I don't go to their meetings, and I don't go out of my way to. I mean, they come to my meetings. I hold a conference about 3 times a year, and in fact, I got one tomorrow. So we're in the cut and bend. And as a result, we're in the defend and cut and bend.
And let's bring up a couple examples of that. You shared with me some of your work, some of this book that you put together that we were just talking about. And I have some slides that I can show you that Gordon has agreed to show. This is just an example, but let's move first to this graph that shows the different wavelengths that some of these UFOs exhibit. Ultraviolet, blue, green, yellow. Tell us what we're looking at here.
You're looking at high voltage. At specific levels of high voltage electrostatic field, the arrow changed color. It'll glow like a heliarc torch. Okay, so they're very bright because you're ionizing the air and you can get all these cute colors. As high voltages, between 1 and 3 million volts.
Are you suggesting that some of these UFOs that are exhibiting these colors can be tracked as far as how much energy they're putting out by the changing or by the color?
Yeah, you can pretty much tell how much energy they're putting out, and you can tell pretty much what voltage level that they're operating at. And you can reverse that back to joules and figure joules down to horsepower if you want, and figure out what's there.
Now, you also talked about cut and bend. Now, you're actually trying to build a working prototype, and this is some of the sort of back engineering you've done with the classic Adamski UFO, just as an example. If you take a look at this this next slide, what we see is a sort of a wireframe image. Tell us about what this and how this is used during the engineering process.
Well, show me the picture.
It's up there now, right there.
Well, that's not a wireframe image. That's a CAD/CAM drawing.
Tell us how that's used
computer. In effect, they segment it. That's called CAD-CAMming. There's no wireframe there. That's just the lines that illustrate the shape of the bird that are done on the computer in order to be able to measure the segments.
And what's
You're looking at the bottom. That's CAD-CAM again. That's computer-aided manufacturing. That's CAD-CAM, computer-aided design, computer-aided manufacturing. That's CAD-CAM pictures.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to explain is that this is one of the first steps you take during the engineering process.
Yeah. That's a good way to start.
Right. And how far along have you gotten?
We're at the point of assembling the damn thing. We're actually assembling it.
So we're using this kind of as an example. When you say at the point, do you have what's holding you back? Is it just a matter of funding?
Oh yeah, well money's right tight lately, haven't you? You haven't noticed? It's rather tight out there.
Especially when you're asking to make a UFO?
Well, see, we call our rig, in effect, the adaption is called Wildcat. It's like an oil well, a first oil well that goes into a new field is called a Wildcat. And because it is experience when you hit that oil, it's generally comes out with lots of force, etc. So a Wildcat, you got to cap it, and it can blow up and do all those things. So the bottom line is we built a rig called a Wildcat. So in order to build that rig and do all this work and assemble all this team and get all this engineering and get the CIA behind us, and because we got enemies, I mean, we really have some.
MJ-12 is really the one that's been.
The CIA is a little bigger than they are.
Because I know you remember that they were really hounding you lately. They pulled you over on the streets of Los Angeles.
Oh yeah, I mean, in fact, that's the only reason I decided to come on your show, because I get to hammer them. They have hit me 54 times in the last 4 years. They've stolen almost $35,000 in green cash money and property out of my homes. They put me in the hospital last year for 2 days in a coma, and the reason was they were kind enough to put heroin in my insulin. And then they kind enough to have a couple of their agent provocateurs, as you would call them. They were black drug gangsters, is a better way to put it. Stick shotguns in my head and tell me that this, that, and the other thing was going to happen. And so they didn't do it again, let me put it like that. And they ain't ever going to do it again.
They've really come close to ending you, yeah. It's a struggle that a lot of other people can echo who are pushing the envelope of bringing this kind of technology to the forefront.
Yeah, well, Majestic doesn't want to have it happen because Majestic gets its control of its dope money from the Bilderbergers, who are the banks of the world, who control the government of the United States and every other government in the world through their banking policy. They have an annual 2-week meeting, and they dictate how the world's going to work for the next year. And they really are the bad boys. These are the characters that really run the world, and even they are run by the Illuminati. The old line families going back a couple of thousand years.
It's my understanding that this technology that you're talking about not only is a source of renewable energy, but it also has a bearing on time itself. How do you tackle the paradoxes involved?
Well, the paradox, that's a very good question, because that's the big reason for the secrecy of all of this. It isn't just the money having to do with the economy, because if this economy was here, you would all be, particularly if you could live about 10 more years, you'd all be billionaires as you understand money, because it's an infinite source of wealth. That is what ET is all about, is an infinite source of wealth. But what he brings with that is the ability, when you negate gravity, you negate time. If you can negate time, you can control it. If you can control it, you can put a camera on the inside and take tomorrow's news today, and we can see tomorrow's news today. When that happens, then you got to ask yourself, well, how am I going to have markets? If I know tomorrow's news today, how am I going to have markets? How am I going to have taxes? How am I going to have voting? How am I going to have wars? How am I going to have just about anything? And how am I going to live with the thought of I'm going to know the day I die? So you get to see the inside of the mind of God, and that's the real reason Majestic doesn't want you to have that, because then you will discover the great secret that the UFO folks keep talking about to their abductees about their metaphysics, which is they believe the universe is God. So if the universe is God, then I'm a part of the universe. I must be a part of God. So that makes me a little sliver of the big guy, and the chances of me dying are probably slim, at least in the perpetual sense. So all of a sudden, you have the knowledge of tomorrow today, and it brings terrible paradoxes that come with that. And how do you run your banks? How do you have losses in the banking system, which is essential as we understand it? How do you have losses in the stock market so we can have gains, which is essential? And how do you run an economy? That is the big trick. So we're making a movie about how you do that.
Well, let me ask you a question. Is there a way to extract this time paradox from this technology just to create the energy alone or propulsion?
No.
One has to have the other.
Yeah, when you negate gravity, our research indicates if you got a 20-foot ball of no gravity area where the electrical fields have dampened out the gravity that would normally be present in the space, okay, and these little particles that are hidden, then little motors can turn big generators. And when that happens, a 10 horsepower motor will turn a 100 horsepower generator, and you got 90 free horsepower. Because you take 10 go tails and loop it back. So you got 90 free horsepower. Well, if you got 90 free horsepower, then what do we need gasoline for? What do we need coal? What do we need nuclear? What do we need gas? We don't need nothing. It's free. And that's what they don't want us to have. That is what's the whole raison d'etre for the secrecy on UFO. They don't care about the aliens and their religions and whether or not we, the people, can recognize that we, the people, may be the people. You know, I'm not in any way demeaning Jesus or Muhammad or the Shinto scrolls or any of those alien planet religions, all right? That's how I feel about it. What I'm saying to you is I do not believe that people have a big problem of looking in the mirror saying, I'm looking at God, because that's the truth. Because if you ain't here, there ain't no reason for this universe. There is none. So you pretty much is it. And that's my philosophy, okay? But I'm not saying it's true. All I know is that the physics research that we've done indicates that the big reason that they don't want to see us get it is because we then become omnipotent in the sense that we know the mind of God before. In effect, if you know tomorrow or today, you know the mind of God. You're not the Oracle of Delphi. You're not some forecaster that's banking on a horse to win in the third. You are the boy. So if that happens, then our whole system changes. We have to look at people for what they are, which is us. We are it. And then the golden rule is really do unto others as you would have them do unto you, because they are you. And then our whole philosophical outlook changes. We no longer have to have gangsters running our business and telling us how to run our governments, because if we don't have to pay for energy, we don't need these gangsters.
Well, when you say this technology is something that they don't want us to have, is it something that they, meaning the 12 or the military-industrial complex, are using now or have been?
I would bet you that they got some little starships in it, and they go up and they drink with them. I would have no doubt that they have the ability out at 51 right now, out at S4, to fly up to starships, and that they have sex with them, and the ones that can have sex, and that they drink with them, and that they exchange information about tomorrow, etc. The only reason I believe I'm alive is they think I win.
Well, so your intelligence network has not been able to garner that specific information as far as what's available, what's working now, what they've come up with?
Yeah, we pretty much know what they got. We know what they got, but I mean, to replicate it ain't as easy as you think. You know, I mean, it's taken me I'm a pretty good promoter, and I've raised a lot of money trying to do this, and I've only got 20 million more to go.
Tell me, if you had a working prototype right now, what would it look like and how would it work?
Well, it would look like sort of like that bird you put up on the thing, Arv. It would sort of look like that maybe, or variations of that design, but that's pretty much the way it looks. They're pretty it's a universal circuit.
Not this one?
No, I don't know what that is.
Oh, the original bird, you mean this one?
Yeah. We call it a universal circuit. It's like a light bulb. I mean, they got Edison light bulbs that have been burning since he made them. Okay, they're still burning out there because he put very heavy tungsten wires in them, and they just don't go away. So a light bulb they got light bulbs that have been burning over 100 years now.
Neon ones?
No, regular incandescent.
Incandescent?
Yeah. So the bottom line is it's a universal circuit. It's like the telephone. I mean, for a long, long time, 50, 60 years, telephones only work one way. Light bulbs today, when you go in and buy a light bulb in the department store or in the food market, that's the same light bulb that Edison made. So it's a universal circuit.
Universal circuit that lies at the heart of this technology?
Yeah, in effect, it's like a jet engine. All jet engines are the same thing. You know, so they have variations of them because of designers and one thing and another, but they all perform the same.
Is it
the Model T works as good as the Ferrari F50.
Is it something that creates a field or something that in the end turns
It
something?
negates gravity.
Right, so it creates a field. Or how about moving parts? Is it very complicated?
No. Motor generator.
How much electricity do you need to start this thing up?
A couple of aircraft starter batteries.
Aircraft?
Yeah, gravity's a weak force. It's a very weak force. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of energy. Gravity, the heavier the object, the stronger the energy, so to speak, okay? But gravity is a weak force. It doesn't take much to break it. But when you break it, and you got a 20-ton object, a 20-ton object can be moved by a roach passing gas, okay, at that point, okay? You get the point? That it's a 20-ton object, but it weighs 0. So if it weighs 0, I can blow on it, and it's going to take off.
So how realistic is it that, since this does create a time paradox, that this technology can be used on a worldwide scale?
Well, I mean, Back to the Future was a great trilogy of movies. That was a flying time machine. It was a UFO in the form of a car. Okay, so what I'm saying to you is that going to see the movie Back to the Future, we found out the guy could win. It was all kinds of paradoxes involved, all right? And they have their pitfalls. But who cares if we ain't got to spend money on our business transactions, and we can have our business transactions at 3 cents on the dollar, because the dollar is related to the sweat and the muscle. My brain power and my muscle is what makes a dollar's value, not the bloody oil under it. Okay? The dollar's value is going to remain the same.
It sounds like this technology would force an economy to totally change on the basis on which their currency is built on.
There would be no need for currency. Who needs money if everybody's rich? You know, it's just noughts in a bookkeeping process, because your wealth is infinite. You ain't got to pay for energy. Just give me back all the money that I have beat out the door for the energy since I was 10 years old. Just give me that money back. Do you know how rich I would be? I mean, in a lifetime of throwing it into the gas pumps, and every time you flush the toilet, the water going down takes energy because of the pipes that brought it there, and the pipes took energy to put it together and to move it there, and gee, it's nothing but energy.
This is a radical idea that we're talking about here, one that will have to rewrite the whole socio-economic network of the world, but it's something still that is worth pursuing, because we know there's a great future out there.
It can happen in this decade.
And as I say, it is reasonable to think that these changes are accessible and available to us. We have to sort of pause here because we want to take some questions. Are there people that have questions? You can come up to this microphone here, and line up. It's got to be on mic, and these are not comments, actually just questions. And Gordon is happy to talk about this in a more detailed manner. Just one at a time, if you would, go on, and we'll start with this this first gentleman right here. You got a question? Please go ahead. Speak up. Go right to the mic, please.
Yes, I do have a question. It has to do, again, with the relationship of gravity to electromagnetism. So I read Paul Hill's book a long time ago, and it's about aerodynamics, but it doesn't address the issue of the relationship of magnetoelectric force to gravitation. Can you tell me what's the fundamental or best reference for that? Is it Landau and Lifshitz or something?
I would say that there really is there's no seminal book. The thing about Hill is he told you what's going on.
Yes, and also about aerodynamics.
But he did. Aerodynamics is an irrelevant point because if you negate gravity around the bird,
so I agree.
Then the air particles become. If I had a gun that could fire a jillion BBs at one time, and we call those molecules, and I tried to move something through a flow of those BBs, the BBs would stop what I'm trying to move. Well, if I make the BBs out of styrofoam, they don't stop nothing.
Okay, but now the question is then, what's the best reference on the relationship of gravity to electromagnetism? And you said that there is no perfect reference, but what's maybe the best one then? The starter one or whatever? Okay, thank you.
Read every paper you can get on, and this is my opinion, on two different gravity theories. One is the polarized vacuum theory of Puthoff and Ruda and Heisch and Cole, and the other one is the vortex theory by Rauscher, Tomby, and Harriman. Those are the seminal gravity theories. One of them's got to be right. I believe it's the vortex theory.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next question, please. Henry, yeah.
Thank you very much, Rob, for helping to facilitate this reality for us all. I'm kind of fascinated by, and I think you are too to some degree, the social, side of the whole thing, which involves banking and people and money and energy and everything.
Yeah, that's really where it's at.
Yeah, I believe it. I picked up this connection in this discussion at the end here, and into my mind comes up a thing that goes back about 100 years to J.P. Morgan and Tesla and Edison and what was going on, including Westinghouse at that time, and the social energy that allowed and cut off funding in different respects. And so in the sense that we've missed for a long time, I was talking to people like, hey, how about Japan, for about 2 or 3 years before, now we're all interested in what happened to Japan economically and how that relates to our own economic situation now. But to look back 100 years socially and see what went on there, because the society hasn't fundamentally changed that much as far as what we do and why, motivationally.
No, we're just led by clever gangsters. I mean, the big business has monopolized oil, coal, gas, nuclear, and they dominate the entire process. The energy industries dominate everything. So if we can, in order for us to get free and to live and be all wealthy, because you could have universal wealth. They do it in Alaska. The Alaska pipeline sends out $25,000 checks, $27,500 checks every year to every Alaskan citizen. They all continue to work. They don't go party. They don't go take endless vacations. They are productive citizens. In Kuwait, the Al-Sabah family doles out $250,000 a year to everybody over there. So as a result, they still keep working. You can have a wealthy society with endless income, and people will continue to do something productive with their lives.
Okay, but the issue that I was talking about at the seed of it has to do with this argument about Tesla wanting to create energy from one point, like a universal energy source.
We tried to do that with Wardenclyffe, and when J.P. Morgan found out he did it, he said, put the kibosh on it and cut off the funding.
Right, because they can't put a monitor in the ground and charge these individuals.
Right. He didn't. Well, Morgan was already in control of most of the oil.
I think the corporation.
him and his buddy Rockefeller were doing pretty good.
I think the corporations may be a little.
Okay, next question. We've got to keep it moving. We've got a lot of people here. Thank you.
Simple question. If you would paint a picture of the reality already without, let's say we overcome and we have the revolution. If you paint a picture of society having this free energy and how the money of it would go, paint the positive side of the picture. How would society run? What do you think the entire economy, how the socio-economic structure would run?
To be very, I'm going to give you an answer as a back-ass answer, a bass-backward answer is a better way to put it. We currently have a unsolicited proposal going into the CIA, okay? This is actually going on right as we speak. One of the 22 million, 2 million is being devoted for research into the macroeconomic, the sociological impact, the paradox impact, and the geopolitical and the exopolitical. So you got 5 areas that you gotta, if you had the toy right now, you'd have to lock it up. Because if you said, I got anti-gravity, the streets of Wall Street would be filled with the bodies of people diving out the window getting rid of their stocks in the energy companies. The utility companies owe $6 trillion in bonds. We can't allow that to go under, okay? That's enough to take the earth down alone with the bonds on the utility companies. So what we're doing is we're researching on how you do it. But the more we research, we're beginning to believe that the extraterrestrial civilizations live on a diktat from the technology. The technology creates the society. Today, our technologies create our society, but not to the degree of talking about not having to spend money for your business transactions. Because your business transactions invariably, I don't care what it is, you're putting out money for energy. The chairman of the board of Exxon said, energy is 80 cents in the dollar. So if distribution is 20% of that, and we get rid of the cost of the energy going into the distribution, and we can have barges that come over our grain fields and suck up the grain and take it directly to the bakeries in France, and we can automate that whole process, guess what? Our cost of doing business is going to be like 3 cents out the dollar.
So that's what your movie is about. That's the movie.
Yeah, we're making a movie right now for the President of the United States. We really are making a movie for him, the NSC, and the NIC, which is National Intelligence Council of the CIA. So we're making a movie to do that.
Thanks. Next question.
I've probably put thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours into this also in the free energy movement.
Yeah.
And I realize the majority of it is based on scams now.
Yeah.
But what about the Tilly Foundation's DeLorean and their Gator and the 12...
Say that again?
The Tilly Foundation that was based out of Tennessee. I saw the DeLorean run up there, and we had one. I used to work for Bell South.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And one of our engineers drove the converted Gator over to free energy, and they drove that thing around for 2 days. Our engineer drove it for 1 day, and someone else drove it for another day while it was under guard. And the battery power was actually higher at the end of the second day than it was before they started. And this is not based on any anti-gravity, but
That was sort of like the Joe Newman drive.
No. His is like the Bendini type, where they high voltage surges and you kill the batteries, but it's not like that. But you may want to try to find out about the Tilly Foundation, because they've already got their, there's a working system.
Yeah, but you know, here, let me tell you something. I keep hearing these stories about this. If I really had free energy, I could do anything with it. It'd be like the simplest cell in the world. So if they've got it, and I heard that back when I used to be his best friend before he died, and I mean I really was. So it's just hard for me to believe that anybody's got it, because if you had it, believe me, you would have no problem selling it.
Well, he has not had a problem selling it. That's just it. You can't even find it on the internet any longer.
What is the name of this?
It's the Tilly Foundation.
Tilly, T-I-L-L-Y?
They built the DeLorean, T-I-L-L-E-Y Foundation.
But why can't he just keep on building stuff?
Because apparently he's already sold it now. It's off the web. You cannot find it on the web any longer.
Then along came the boys from Exxon, and he said, I want to go live in the Bahamas or in Bali or whatever, and he had a good time.
I understand, but that was not anti-gravity. But one more point, though. Dr. Greer's disclosure project, he also has the Orion project. He says that he has a scientist now from the government that they've released for 2 years, and all they need is $3 million, and I'm putting money toward his now. And if they can...
You're putting it toward me because he's on my board.
Then why do you need some? He said they can do it with $3 million, and why do you need another additional 20?
Well, the 3 million he's looking for is for anti-gravity zero-point energy systems that are standalone.
Correct.
And we're not approaching the system the same way. Our theory is you negate gravity, energy's free.
Okay, so you're not really looking just for energy. You're looking for time as well.
We're looking for I mean, I'm sure you realize that just from a construction industry standpoint, if we had anti-gravity, we could go do anything. I mean, you could turn the Gobi into an oasis. You could turn the Sahara into an oasis. You could change. You could landscape the planet any way you want. You can move mountains with it. You know. So.
Can we get a next question, please?
Hi there.
Hi.
I'd like to know, what are your thoughts on the Stargate, Mars, and why are we shooting down UFOs, and why are they shooting each other?
Well, I've heard all these tales. First, I don't believe in these Stargates. I ain't seen one. I don't know how you would do that. The process of creating a wormhole to hold it open would be just monumental. Now, there may be a way to do it, and they may do it, and there is some indication that they occasionally seem like they're coming in and that they just suddenly are there. Well, they can also do that by translating time. You know, they can say, okay, well, they can come into our atmosphere and go back and forth in time and look at the whole story, okay? These are sort of, we'll call it visual parks. Okay, so they come here. Gee, let's go back, and little Alf says, I want to see the pyramids. I want to see how they built the pyramids, and da-da-da-da-da. They just take a quick run back, and they go thin, and they come back here, and then they pop into existence, and somebody catches them with a camera. They say, oh, Stargate. So the answer to the first question is that, and then what was your other question?
Mars.
I mean, there could have been something there, but I'm not a fan of Hoagland. That face seems to keep disappearing for me. So I'm not saying that he isn't right, and he is. I ain't been there, and I'm from Missouri, so you know.
All right. Do we have another question, please? Thanks.
Thank you for your good presentation. Tell me, do you think the new government, Obama, will do some things better now and will be open to it?
He better.
I hope so.
He better, because I got a way to make him do it.
Thanks, Gordon, for being here. I got questions on JFK I'd like to ask you afterward. You mentioned that the UFOs are not interested in us because we're barbarians. Why would they be going up and partying with barbarians?
Because those barbarians happen to have the same technology, so and they're not really barbarians. They're the elite of elite. The Majestic Gang are the elite of the elite. They're the ultra Nazis, is a good way to put it. Okay, that's the best way I can tell you how I look at them. They're the ultimate fascist pigs. So what can I say except if they've got the technology and ET wants to fool around with them, they probably do. Sex is popular.
One more question on free energy. You're saying that it would be possible to scale down free energy to a small engine to replace, say, the vehicle in a cost-effective manner to replace oil. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ron.
Thank you, sir, for being here. Will you tell us what you know about Bob Lazar's discussions and how that may or may not relate to reality?
Let me just say, Lazar's bizarre is how I kind of look at Bob. I don't believe that Lazar ever worked at Area 51. I don't believe he ever got inside of a UFO. I don't believe in unobtainium 115. I don't believe in the gravity A wave. I don't believe in... the only thing I believe is he knew some guy by the name of Dennis who did work out there, and he hung out with a scoundrel by the name of John Lear. So I answered your question. I think he's full of bull. That's the good way to put it.
Excellent interview. Thanks for being here. And good job, Rob. Two questions. What have you learned if they have the ability to see the future about what's coming for 2012? And the second question, well, I'd also be curious to see how far along our government is to interstellar travel, but also if you were to meet directly with an extraterrestrial, it sounds like you've already got a lot of good philosophies on what you learned from the conversation, but are there just a handful of questions or less than a handful that you'd want to know answered from that direct contact?
I have a friend of mine who's written 3 books by the name of Lizette Larson. It's called Talking to Extraterrestrials, Communicating with Extraterrestrials, and Fooling Around with Extraterrestrials. Beautiful woman, by the way. And from what I gather, they are kind of above our barbarian habits, is a good way to put it. They probably can get photosynthesis out of looking at the sun, so they don't need food. And they know how to take in sunlight enough through their eyes, those are their big eyes, that they are able to matriculate the sun into the energy that drives their bodies. I've heard some really horny stories about abductions that are, I mean, if we were not in mixed company, I could regale you with some tales that I heard, because I was interested in that myself.
Do you know how far the interstellar travel, or maybe the black government or the military astronaut program has progressed thus far?
I would imagine that that the Serpo story is, some variation of it is true. I would believe that that the technology, based upon what I know, you could probably tour the solar system in under a few hours, the solar system. So the technology, while there may be vast gulfs of distance, when you start talking about unlimited speeds above sea that are unlimited, meaning thousands of times warp speed. I mean, it's just and they are there. So they're coming in our atmosphere. There's over 5,000 photographs that indicate they all got different planforms. So everybody's got their own little version of UFO, but they're all pretty much the same. There's some flying cigar boxes, but they're the same too. Okay, it's just a matter of where you hang the units, the power unit. So the bottom line is that I would bet you that we are in a dialogue with them vis-a-vis majestic, and that is a very clicky type of thing. I mean, for Colonel Mitchell, or Dr. Mitchell, to say what he said about we're in contact. We're in contact. Clark McKellen, a NASA scientist, has said he saw a 9-foot extraterrestrial stand in the bay of the space shuttle talking to 2 bloody astronauts.
We're gonna have to wrap it up. We're just out of time.
I mean, he's telling that these guys are not lying. So it's here. The question is how do we get it out of the closet?
We're gonna have to wrap it up. We're just out of time. But as you can see, this spawns a myriad of questions, and all of them are tantalizing and encouraging at the same time. I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank Gordon Novell for coming here for another edition of Disclosure Dialogue. And I want to thank you for your participation. So for Gordon Novell, my name is Rob Simone. Thank you for coming once again together with us.
Gordon Novell. Rob Simone and Gordon Novell.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you very much.